the thing that was up there said it's a roast for John Willis, not necessarily a roast of John Willis. And also, when I think of roast, I want to see like smoking jackets and like some focus on the thing. We'll give Michael credit for his roast yesterday, but when I ask when's the roast, Chris is like, "You're just supposed to make fun of John during your talk." So I guess we'll do a little bit of that, but I'm mostly going to roast all of you, the industry, myself. It's fine, like my normal talk. So this was advertised as a Deming's Days. Who actually knew about Deming before they came today? A little bit. I think I have averaged a good like 1 point something Deming quotes in every talk I ever gave since the beginning of DevOps. So today you're going to get more than that. Good deal? So I never heard this until yesterday. Katie said, plan, do, study, adjust, because most people say plan, do, check, act. And then I started reading, and it's like Deming likes study better than check because these other psychological things. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I went home and I did a Google search. It's like no one says plan, do, study, adjust, really. No one searched for it. So no one really searches for plan, do, study, adjust, which is okay. They do search for the acronyms a little bit. And then I got to Wikipedia, which is the canonical source of truth for everything, right? And it's like sometimes people call it plan, do, check, adjust. I was like, what is going on? And if you go back here, you can notice there's another version which stands for observation, or as some say, observe the current condition, which I'm sure is done with a lot of pedantic gusto sometimes. So keep that in mind when you read this. You can go back through all your puppet and chef wars and the arguments over platform engineering and SREs and whatever the rest. So I'll read it out loud. Narcissism of small differences is the idea that the more a relationship or community shares commonalities, the more likely the people in it are to engage in interpersonal feuds and mutual ridicule because of hypersensitivity to minor differences perceived in each other. Does anyone know who said that? That's Sigmund Freud. We're going to get a lot of quotes today. So what should we do? I think this is every conversation since the beginning of DevOps. And the answer is trademarked. And then you have this conversation over and over. We don't know what to do because DevOps isn't well defined. We need a definition of DevOps. Okay. And then this book came out, and it was like, well, we can't do SRE by the book. So which is it? That's convenient. So here's a little guy, did a few things. DevOps has been very good to me, let's be clear. And I never really liked that word when it started. I thought that word was dumb. I thought the word cloud was even dumber, but I couldn't stop that either. And then we just keep like this parade of buzzwords on top of buzzwords on top of buzzwords, and like you try to do what you can in the mix of that. So my background really, I started as a software developer. I got into ops because I got focused on a project called Puppet, which was a thing that was sort of leading up to the dev and the ops conversation we're having today. But before that, I was really influenced by Lean. I got introduced to Lean by Jeff Patton and all the kind of like Lean software people, so Poppendieck and Anderson, and reading that kind of stuff. So in parallel, I was working on these projects, Puppet, OpenStack, Cloud Foundry, Kubernetes, and helping write books and helping organize these conferences around the world, which gave me, I won't say I'm the smartest person, but I got a lot of friends. They're really smart, and I could watch what they do. So sometimes people say, these people invented DevOps or whatever. I don't think that's true. I think you just get to be in a place where you see that and you say that, but it wasn't there. It wasn't yours. It was just the principle that's timeless. The patterns that are forever. And I got to see some of that in this career. So I've been working on this other little side quest. Ergonautic is my little consulting company. This is the softest pitch ever for if you like anything I say today, think it's interesting, think it could be useful in whatever you do, reach out to me on LinkedIn. We can continue that conversation. So, another quote. There's going to be a lot of quotes, by the way. A lot. Just prepare for that. And there's some twists, plot twists. So for every complex problem, there's an answer that's clear, simple, and I think this really summarizes almost everything in the tech industry. Wrong. Marketing ruins everything. That's an old quote from the turn of the century. And then this is another quote. Learning is the only sustainable advantage. You're either building a learning organization or losing to someone who is. That was me in 2013, and you all weren't ready for that. And I learned that lesson that if you tell people a truth they're not ready to hear, that's the same thing as lying to them. But you can go back and watch that talk. That's a good talk. All right. So here we're going to plan. We got a plan. This is what we did. We're through the preamble. We're going to do some socio-technical systems, a little bit of a shout out to Deming. We're going to go down this OODA loop rabbit hole for a minute, come back up to origin myths, the theory of conflicts, and then conclude. Okay, ready? So this is the TLDR. You can leave now if you just read this slide. These principles are timeless. I'm going to try to prove that. All loops are topologically equivalent because I'm a math geek. And I think someone wants me to say Pareto inefficient Nash equilibrium, which is another thing. This is a little bit of a roast of John. Like, I usually give talks, and then John comes and says, I think you're wrong. And I'm like, I'm right. And then he leaves and comes back, and he's like, okay, I understand now. So I used to talk about the Pareto inefficient Nash equilibrium. That's the problem that all of you have. I've tried to simplify that a little bit over time because that's my gratuitous math way to say things. And people are like, oh, what does that mean? So hopefully we'll get through that. I'm going to give you a little bit of my loopy move measure stuff, which I think is equivalent to all these other loops, which you'll see, and then a useful model for deving the ops. So let's do it. Let's go. I'll let John tell this story. It's out on the internet if you want to know the whole story, but basically, I made a contract to jump out of an airplane with John about 10 years ago, and we got to do it last year. It was really fun. We're going to do it again this year. We should do it again next year. If anyone wants to come jump out of an airplane with us, you're welcome. So DevOps starts in the 1950s. That's not true. It started way before that, but let's go to the 1950s for a minute. So there's this guy, Trist, at the Tavistock Institute. He's credited with coining the term socio-technical systems. He coins that term while studying the mechanization of British coal mines. And if you go read those papers, and there's a bunch of research, and there's like some other little side quests, and there's like the lowlands, Dutch people doing stuff in the 70s. There's lots of cool research about how this works, and you see almost the exact same patterns that we saw with the adoption of DevOps tooling. And I'm going to just go out and allege and wager that you're going to see similar problems with these AI adoptions and like the new tooling. Always the same thing. So the fundamental theorem of socio-technical theory is that the quality of any organizational system can only be understood and improved if social and technical are both considered as interdependent parts of a single system. If you don't understand how to run an efficient operation, new machinery will just give you new problems of operation and maintenance. The sure way to increase productivity is to better administrate man-machine. That's a Deming quote you could put in the column for Deming. So he's talking about socio-technical systems the whole time too, but he uses slightly different language and a slightly different lens. This is from Trist's papers studying coal mines in the 1950s, talking about the old paradigm and the new paradigm. So the old paradigm in 1950s coal mining is the technological imperative that we will bring tools to the problem. The new paradigm in 1950s is the joint optimization of the social and technical. I don't necessarily need to read all of these. You can read them. But I'm going to skip to the middle here where it says the tall organizational chart in an autocratic style. That's the old way in the 1950s. But the new way is a flat organizational chart with participative style, right? Like we invented so many things here in the 2000s. And then very, very last, low risk taking is the old way. The new way is innovation. Who wouldn't want that? 1950s coal mining. And then you get to Deming in 1980. He did a bunch of stuff in the 50s too to like get to this part of the story. And before that, this is in John's book. I didn't put it in my slides, but I just want to say it real quick. Deming did a lot of great work in the US. And then what happened was he was optimizing these factories during World War II. And then all the men came back from the war, and they're like, that's good when there's women running the factories, but we're not doing that. So then he had to go to Japan so we could hear about him. So this is a video. You can go watch this whole thing on YouTube. Deming in 1980 says, I think that people here expect miracles. American management thinks they can just copy from Japan, but they don't know what to copy. And I have longer versions of some of these topics on other videos at other DevOps days, but without Deming, there would have been no Toyota, there would have been no Lean, and there would have been no DevOps. And a lot of the conversations I was having in 2009 was because I was like excited about the 14 points and quoting Deming in every talk. So these American executives visited Japanese factories, and they thought the Japanese were lying to them. They thought they were hiding the truth because they couldn't conceive of just-in-time delivery. Their whole model was predicated on these factories and stacking inventory. They couldn't understand how to continuously deploy microservices, right? They thought they're lying. No one could ever possibly do 10 deploys a day. And they thought that the Japanese were just putting on a little show. They had to have inventory hiding somewhere. So GM sees these factories, they see the robots, and they decide that they're gonna compete. So what do? In 1980s money, they spent $45 billion to mechanize their factories. And despite that spending, their market share rose by a single percentage point, and for the same amount of money at that time, they could have bought Toyota and Nissan outright, which would have instantly bumped their market share to 40%. Good strategy. So you can read case studies on this. Quality suffered because instead of making flawless cars, workers simply did their assigned jobs. Workers had no big picture goal of building cars together to motivate them, and focusing on the technical without accounting for the social never goes very well. All you do is automate confusion. So that you can go read that case study. So this is one of my favorite quotes. I probably use this one almost the most in any Deming. It's not necessary to change. Survival is not mandatory. My guy. This is always true. It's always true, but there's like punctuated equilibrium, and sometimes it's more true. I feel like it's more true right now. I feel like the whole world is being reconfigured, at least the technical world. Maybe like the geopolitical and economic world too, but we won't talk about that. So this is another callback to this other talk. John says it's one of the best talks ever. Just saying. So the metaphor here is the Gatling gun changes everything forever, right? Before, and you can find this punctuated equilibrium in war throughout history where whatever happened before can never be the same once this innovation happens, right? So Gatling gun's an example of that. You have, I don't know, there's some that impacted Japan a little bit that you could think about, which is a horrible thing to do to a country, but that's another thing. So who's ever seen the OODA loop? So most of the time when people introduce the OODA loop, they get a little over-rotated on the idea of the OODA loop is just to go faster. And one of the nice things about the OODA loop, which you have to do a little bit of work to make the plan, do, check, act work for you, is it implicitly or explicitly includes an adversary and a conflict. That you're trying to go through this thing to beat someone, where the The nice people in lean land don't always have that in there. They do if you get deep enough, because you're trying to win. But so this is primordial OODA comes from an essay in 1976, and then some people would say that the introduction is this paper that John wrote in 1986, and then it's really formally defined not until 1995, which is interesting. But I'm going to argue that the OODA loop is meaningless. It's literally useless unless you have the aerial attack study, which he wrote in 1960. It was rewritten in 1964. It was classified until, I don't know what year it was declassified, but now you can go read this whole thing. And what he does in this book, this little pamphlet, it's about 150 pages, is he talks about the limitations of our weapon system, the types of curves, the high side attack. Like, he goes through all these things, and then he gets the fighter versus the fighter, and the fighter versus the bomber, and all the fighter maneuvers. And he draws all these pictures, and he gets out protractors, and he talks about the turning radius and the thrust of the aircraft. And it all comes down to the simplified version of the model, which is kind of like the chess version of control the center of the board, is that you have a cone of attack projecting in front of you, and the adversary has a cone of attack projecting in front of you, and everything is about trying to put your cone on them and keep their cone off you, right? And so here's this geometry where you have countering the overhead attack with the negative delta Mach. It's like super exciting. So there's someone coming down on top of you, and you're going to come back around and like be behind them. And he draws all sorts of pictures like this, right? So I'm going to argue that OODA is useless without the aerial attack study, because without that model of a domain, you don't have any basis for observation. You don't have any basis for orientation. You can't decide anything. You can't act. Or you can act, but you won't really know what's working. You can prove this pretty fast if you want to play chess with me, and you just have to move as fast as you can. And I'll move as fast as you, but you don't have a good model, probably, unless you're like 2,000 plus ELO. So if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. It is not enough to do your best. You must know what to do and then do your best. Rational behavior requires theory. These are all Deming quotes. So Deming's basically telling you, you need a model of these things, or you can't make good decisions. So I'm going to argue all these loops are the same. So OODA loop, control theory, cybernetics, plan, do, check, act, plan, do, study, act, plan, do, study, adjust. Put all of them in one bucket. I really like this oversimplified double loop learning sometimes, and then I want people to believe it's not magic. It's just science. We're going to go into science too. What's the origins of science? We'll get there in a minute. So these are all the same. Like it's silly to argue that you innovated on a loop. Like it's a loop, it's a circle. So this is from Wikipedia, canonical source of truth, control loops. You have something comes in, it's measured, and then something makes a decision, and it does something. You just go back and forth, right? Or in that cycle. That's pretty cool. So in the single loop learning model, the only thing you really can adjust is your actions. So like you get information, you can build this little thing, and you try to get better to win whatever the game is. And then the double loop learning, and this is totally oversimplified. We can do the long version later, but I'll take an hour. Is that your actions and your interpretation of the information are based on these assumptions, your model, and that there should be some mechanism, usually a slower cadence, to go back and revisit the assumptions. And then this is the one I like. I made this for my own little thing, and I also made 3 M's because, So model, move, measure. And then I'm going to say, for the way Deming talks about it, if you really want to go read about all this, that this is effectively planning is a function of your model that's going to determine what you do, your movements, and then you're going to study what happened from your movements, and you're going to go back to adjust. I'm going to go back to this one just for 1 second, because one of the things, and this is whether you're learning as an individual or an organization, action is information. If you're just doing nothing, you can't learn. Like, you have to make actions to get feedback. So control loop, same thing. Controller that has a model of the system. The thing that I'm trying to make explicit is that you can improve the model. You can also improve the sensors. You can also improve the actions you can take, right? There's all these things can be improved. And this is effectively what a lot of our systems are doing, right? So you have this declared current state, or I mean the measured current state from the sensors compared against the desired state, and then something decides what to do or not do, and then it takes an action. And this is what's happening when you run Kubernetes. This is what happened when you used to run Puppet. This is what happens if you look and squint at it if you're doing test-driven development. It's that same cycle. So I'm trying to make this thing be in whatever the declared state is, I'm trying to make that true. And this is also the same thing if you're going to build agentic models. This is the same loop. That's what you're building, right? And everyone's talking about evals. If you're in that conversation right now, you got a bunch of things running around. Like, how do you know they're doing the right thing? You better know. Someone better know. All right, so study. So this I thought was interesting. They said yesterday, we have backwards. We think about the results as the primary instead of the input. And that was good. Think about that. And this is one of the things, I thought this for a long time, and I think this relates to like the platform engineering conversation or DevOps, whatever it should be, conversation, is the most important thing Toyota produces is not a car, but the system that produces cars. So you optimize the system to get the output, with the output coming back into the thing you're trying to do. So this is that guy. We know this guy. A bad system will beat a good person every time. Deming. Quality is pride of workmanship. Deming. Excellence is never an accident, it is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny. That sounds a lot like Deming. That's Aristotle. Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. So that's a good 2,500 years ago. Then there's this guy, Francis Bacon. So people say he's credited with the scientific method, or he articulated certain things that people want to give him credit for. There's no root cause. So in the 11th century, this guy in the Middle East wrote a 7-volume treatise on optics. And he was the first to make a systematic use of the method of varying the experimental conditions in a constant uniform manner, according to Wikipedia. But if you go even farther down the rabbit hole of the scientific method, there's this Egyptian medical textbook from 1600 BCE, and it has this methodology of examination, diagnosis, treatment, and prognosis. That looks suspiciously like one of these other looping methods, right? In Egypt, 1600 BCE. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the root cause is where you stop looking. That's also from Egypt, 1600 BCE. And they probably said this too. If you say mean time to resolve or whatever R you want to use, we're coming for you. But I digress. All right, so the home front. So you have these socio-technical things going on. I think there's this pendulum that swings in the DevOps conversation, and it's not wrong, but it's also wrong, which is sometimes people are like, oh, it's all about the culture. And then other people are like, it's all about the tools, or like it's not technical enough. And it's like, you're both wrong, right? You have the social impacting the technical and the technical impacting the social. And you also have these loops inside of them. So there's this fundamental belief that you have that's driving your behaviors. And then on the other side, you have skills that impact your tools. If you get new tools, but you don't have the skills to use them, then everything looks like a hammer, right? So how do you get out of that? Well, this is actually happening in your org at every single level and every single role. And this is language I like to use or start using in conversations I have with people, is that if you have disconnects between leaderships, managers, and practitioners, I call that a delamination. So there's some sort of disconnect or misalignment, and then we have the classic Dev and Ops divide, which is a disintegration, where you have a disconnect between capabilities. So you have a up and down and across. And I'm going to say that these result from conflicts between the selfish interests and the collective interests. And misunderstanding about how, probably you could blame a little bit on the leaders, but not really. It's just where we're at. So there's this guy, Deming. People with targets and jobs dependent upon meeting them will probably meet the targets even if they have to destroy the enterprise to do it. Who works there? I say this all the time right now. Show me the org chart and the funding model, and I can explain what is difficult. So these small misalignments prevent a lot of progress in organizations, and I'm kind of going to argue that's what keeps us from learning. So to get through that, you need to make these conflicts explicit and productive and get to establish this common ground to enable the shared practices. If you don't do this, your platform, DevOps, SRE stuff never works. Right? If you build it, they will run. So you're trying to smooth these boundaries between the tasks and the teams, and that is your tools, your structures, and your narratives. Any organization that designs a system, it's another quote, will produce a design or structure as a copy of the organization's communication structure. My guy, Melvin. This rules everything around you. So adjust. This is a little model. I'm going to speed run a little bit, but I have done longer version of this talk. So the Bezos memo is in 2002. He says, all teams will henceforth expose their data and functionality through service interfaces. Teams must communicate with each other through these interfaces. So he's saying in 2002, it's like API or death, right? Like give me an API or give me death. And then at the bottom, anyone who doesn't do this will be fired. So this is like CEO level mandate, 2002. This is what creates Amazon that we know today. So just for the sake of saying the three-layer cake, which is the NIST definition of cloud computing, you have like software stuff, and then you have this middleware stuff, and then you have this stuff that makes the machines, the silicon work. And I'm going to say that maps pretty cleanly onto the NIST definition of cloud computing, which are software service, platform service, infrastructure service. That's from 2011. One of the prerequisites for cloud in 2011 definition from NIST is self-service. And what I want everyone to realize here is that every layer, infrastructure, platform, and obviously software, are all software, all of which require software development and operations. So you can make some choices about what you want to do, your model. If you go to a cloud provider, maybe you don't have to worry about the bottom layer. Right now, there's no one in the market that's going to give you a fit-for-purpose platform for every single thing. Like you might find some platformy stuff that kind of works, but there's a lot of platform development that has to happen right now. Some people might call it engineering. Good job. So each of these has their own life cycle. We want to keep them going. And this comes back to the most misunderstood quote in DevOps ever. You build it, you run it, but you're missing the context, which is the developers getting contact with the day-to-day operation of their software. And then this is a similar thing from the SRE book, that the SRE build these framework modules to implement canonical solutions. As a result, the development teams can focus on the business logic because the framework already takes care of correct infrastructure use. This is this guy. He probably said it with a laugh. And when he said that in 2006, which is 3 years before DevOps is a word, he meant that you have a two-pizza team that's concerned with running software. They are not running a platform or infrastructure for themselves because they have APIs for that. I'm not even going to say anything. Because the 2011 NIST definition of cloud computing said self-service, so you can do. So all these things happen at different paces. The pace changing can create turbulence and sharing between layers. This is technical and social, right? So we want to have integration Continuous integration can reduce the risk of your code deployment, but you should also have a mechanism for integrating the socio side. So there's probably missing meetings and missing metrics in your organization that keep you from fixing these alignments, the delamination and disintegration that happens. So we're coming to the end. We need to add a lean to CAMs so that it wouldn't spell scam. That's a little bit of a joke, inside joke. It kind of actually makes me sad that people in DevOps don't talk about the CAMs thing. Like, it used to be like a little bit of a bright line. You could ask someone if they knew what that was, and if they didn't, like, oh, you're not in the tribe, in the real tribe. Anyway. So, and also, I think this is a good thing to add to it. It's not, whatever we are today is not good enough for tomorrow, right? Like, whatever we did with Puppet's not good enough for tomorrow. Whatever we're doing with Kubernetes today is not good enough for tomorrow. Like, there's always going to be some change. And then I like to make these 3 columns. So complacent is not as good as inspired. I mean, you can work where you want, but that's what I'd say. So here we are, home stretch. So I used to get really frustrated when people would say, oh, we're doing Agile and we're doing DevOps. And then it's like, well, why aren't you good at anything? Like, you aren't good at anything related to software operations. So, like, you have this vocabulary, but you don't do anything. And what I started to realize after having that conversation over and over is that in the early Velocity Conference, DevOpsDays conversations, you have these early adopters who are seeking an advantage. The fact that they're seeking an advantage gives them one, and then that legitimizes the practice. And once the practice is legitimized, what happens is that as you come into maybe the beginning lip of the early majority seeking an advantage, but as you come into the late majority, everyone is really just seeking legitimacy. They want to use the vocabulary, but change nothing else. And the practices cross the chasm a lot slower than the vocabulary. So my advice to you is seek advantage, and also recognize that change is hard, because if you're trying to learn new skills, your performance almost always goes down before it goes back up. If you've ever tried to learn anything hard, sports, music, chess, or whatever, when you try to do new things, your performance almost always goes down. And if you're not cognizant of that in a socio setting, and you don't manage the politics of it, you're never going to get out of the bottom. You're never going to get out of the dip, because they will come for you. Ask me how I know after. So how many times we say something doesn't matter as much as how many people still need to hear the message. Sometimes people say things like, oh, DevOps, it's like your first DevOps days, and on some level, everything that ever needed to be said about DevOps was said in 2010, but if you haven't heard it, we're still here with the message. So I am forever learning and changing. We are here to make another world. These are 2 different Deming quotes, but I really like this. And I'm going to say this, if there ever should have been a manifesto, this is what it should have been, a DevOps manifesto. I am forever learning and changing. We are here to make another world. So I'm going to sign that right now. And then I'm going to ask you to sign it too. So I want everyone to just say this with me. I'll say it, and you say it back. So I am forever learning and changing. I am forever learning and changing. We are here to make another world. All right, let's go. You haven't learned anything until you change your behavior. So whatever you do for these days, when you go back to work, if it's just the words and you don't get new behaviors, then you're just collecting trivia. You're not actually learning. So I'm encouraging you to go back and try something new. Try an experiment. Do some science. Waste no more time, this is another quote, waste no more time arguing about what a good DevOps should be. Be one. That's Marcus, my boy Marcus. When you're reading Greek stuff, you got to find the good ones. So maybe the real DevOps are the friends we made along the way. And that's the end. Thanks for listening.